You're just a secretary. Celeste, know your place.
The words hung in the air like thick smoke, curling into every corner of that sterile boardroom. No one spoke. The projector continued humming behind me, casting numbers. I'd spent 2 nights preparing across the white wall. And yet, none of that mattered now. Not the effort, not the loyalty, not the years. Graham Vexley didn't even glance my way after saying it. He'd already turned back to his glossy PowerPoint, like I was nothing more than static between slides. I didn't react, not visibly. My hands stayed still, my face was steady. But inside, something sharp snapped loose. 18 years I'd worked here. I remembered when this building was still a shell of scaffolding. I remembered helping Howard Delacroix choose the original boardroom chairs. I remembered ordering lunch during investor summits and staying late to draft crisis responses that carried the CEO's name but bore my voice. And now I was being told, in front of an entire executive team, that my thoughts didn't matter, that my voice had no place. Graham was the new golden boy, just shy of 40, MBA from somewhere prestigious, though I doubted he ever read more than the executive summaries, fast-talking, tailored suits, and a Rolodex of buzzwords. The board loved him because he promised agility and disruption. What he really brought was arrogance. I sat at the edge of the room, like I always did, not quite in, not quite out. The role of the invisible fixture paper. Coffee, smiles. I watched the room fall silent, eyes darting to me and back to their laps. No one defended me. Not even the CFO I'd helped through 2 divorces and a tax scandal. Not the VP of legal I'd stayed late with to find a clause that saved us from a class action. Not the marketing director whose daughter I once mentored through her first job interview. That was the worst part. Really not what Graham said, but how easily everyone else let him say it. I gathered my notepad, my pen, my dignity, and I stood, not dramatically, not with any kind of flourish, just enough for my chair to whisper against the floor and remind the room I was still there. No one said anything as I walked out. One man shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed, but no one spoke my name. Back at my desk, the air felt colder, or maybe I'd simply noticed it for the first time. The chatter from younger assistants 3 cubicles down seemed louder than usual, filtered through their wireless earbuds, and their giggles about someone's weekend plans in Montauk. I sat down and logged into my laptop, not to schedule meetings, not to respond to the 27 unread emails. I opened a different tab, something I hadn't touched in over a decade, the company's internal investment portal. I had stock options. All long-time employees did, but over the years, I'd forgotten the details. I never sold, never moved anything. I didn't need to. My salary was modest but steady, and I'd always lived within my means. The numbers hadn't changed much since I last looked, but suddenly, they felt different. I remembered how I used to comb through quarterly statements like they were puzzles. Back before I gave up trying to be more than what people saw, a knock at the edge of my cubicle startled me. Lydia Caro, the new assistant who shadowed me twice a week, stood with a nervous smile. She looked like she wanted to vanish and speak at the same time. "Hey," she said softly, holding a folder. "I just wanted to say, you didn't deserve that." I looked up at her. She was younger than my daughter, eyes full of effort, but always walking on eggshells around upper management. "Thank you," I replied, voice quiet, "but I've learned something today." She tilted her head. "What's that?" I paused, then smiled, that I've been sitting quietly for too long. That night, I stayed late. Everyone else had gone home. One by one, lights blinked out across the office like a city slowly dimming. The cleaning crew came and went. I was still there, hunched over historical financial records, tracing share allocations like breadcrumbs in a dark forest. I pulled up old HR documents, looked at the equity plans from 2009. I dug through emails from a decade ago, when Howard was still CEO, when he asked me to notarize a restructuring proposal, one that included a note about Class C silent equity. I had forgotten all about it. The clause was buried deep in the footnotes. Something about deferred seniority grants for legacy employees. Something about silent voting privileges. Something important. And then I found it. A quiet entry listed under my employee ID. A block of shares tied to a trust that had never been activated, still earning dividends. It was small once, but after all the stock splits and growth and reinvestments, my heart raced. I had more stock than I realized. Stock I'd never sold. Stock that had matured. It wasn't just something. It was a lot. Not enough to own the company. Not yet. But enough to start asking questions. I leaned back in my chair, eyes burning from the screen. For a moment, I didn't feel like someone who'd just been humiliated in front of a boardroom. I felt like someone holding a secret worth more than anything Graham could comprehend. Before I shut down my laptop, I opened a new browser tab and typed in the name of someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Howard Delacroix. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I didn't feel like just a secretary. Sometimes the people with the least to say know the most. The next morning, I came in early, earlier than usual. I didn't stop at the lobby cafe, didn't chat with security, just walked straight to my desk with purpose I hadn't felt in years. For the first hour, I went through old documents, printed ones, the kind that smelled like copier toner and ancient dust. Most people here had moved everything to the cloud years ago, but I had always kept paper backups outdated. They said, turns out, paper doesn't forget. I pulled a labeled binder from the archive shelf behind my desk. Equity agreements, 2005, 2010. The years no one wanted to talk about anymore. The years the company was still crawling after the crash. I flipped through page after page of silent deals, bonus deferrals, restructuring drafts, and there it was again. Class C discretionary shares, issued only to senior staff who had remained through the 2009 downsizing. My name, signed by Howard Delacroix himself. I leaned back in my chair. Memories flooded in those nights when I stayed long after others had gone, helping him organize emergency payroll, keeping staff from panicking, drafting press releases under candlelight logic and caffeine. Howard had always said, people who show up when things are ugly are worth more than those who arrive when the floors are polished. Now I knew he meant it. I looked him up that afternoon. He wasn't easy to find. No LinkedIn, no company phone number, not even an active email in the system. But I remembered something years ago. He mentioned a lake house in Vermont, a place he said he'd vanished to when the wolves took over the glass towers. It took me 2 calls and 1 polite conversation with an old receptionist who remembered my voice. But eventually, I had a number. The phone rang 5 times before someone picked up. Delacroix. His voice was slower than I remembered. Older, but still firm. Howard. It's Celeste Morland. There was silence. A long one. Then, well, I'll be damned. We spoke for nearly an hour. He remembered everything, especially the nights when no one but me showed up. He told me how disappointed he was in what the company had become. He said he'd been watching from afar, quietly, waiting. Why now, Celeste? He asked. I hesitated, because yesterday, I was reminded what they think I am. He didn't need clarification. He understood. You've always had more claim to this company than half the suits in that building, he said, and that's why I'm going to offer you something. He explained. He still held 20% equity Class A, untouched, mostly voting shares. He'd been waiting for the right moment. For the right person. I don't need a throne, I said. I just need the ground to be steady again. I'm offering you the balance of power, he replied. What you do with it, that's yours. We met 2 days later, quietly, at a small notary office in Burlington. No press, no drama. I signed papers that transferred not just his shares, but the voting rights tied to them. He smiled as I signed. I was hoping you'd call before the wolves burned the place down. On my way home, I stopped at a gas station to breathe. I bought a coffee, watched maple leaves scatter across the pavement, and laughed to myself for no reason. Me, a secretary, majority shareholder. I didn't tell anyone, not yet. Back at the office, things resumed their rhythm. Graham strutted through the halls as if nothing had shifted. He still tossed out half-thought ideas in meetings, still made interns scramble for his approvals. But something was different. I wasn't afraid anymore. I could see the cracks in his performance, the way he deflected blame when things failed, the way he smirked when others spoke. I wasn't intimidated by his MBA or his connections. Not anymore, because now I had something he didn't even know existed. Leverage. That night, I stayed late again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to understand every inch of the power I now held. I pulled the shareholder directory, cross-referenced it with my own documents. If I was right, and I was and now held 51.3% of all voting shares, and yet, I still came to work at 7:45. I still wore my navy blazer and practical shoes. I still typed up memos and arranged meetings and refilled the printer paper. But the silence around me had changed. People were noticing something, even if they couldn't name it yet. Lydia passed by my desk with a glance and a quiet, curious smile. Everything okay, Miss Morland? I nodded. Yes, just tying up a few loose ends. Because soon, I would pull the first thread, and the whole illusion would unravel. The office had always ignored her presence. That week, they started to notice. They say power changes how people look at you. But in my case, I hadn't said a word. I hadn't changed my wardrobe, or taken a new office, or made a single public move. And yet, something about the air shifted. I could feel it in the way people paused when passing my desk, in the way conversations hushed the moment I entered the kitchen for coffee. I was still just Celeste Morland's secretary to the executive office. The title hadn't changed, but something in their eyes had. Monday morning came with a low buzz across the office. Something was brewing, not from me, at least not yet. But from the tension I knew Graham must be feeling, the man thrived on control, and lately, he was losing the scent of it. Lydia Caro, ever watchful, stopped by my desk mid-morning. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to me. He's been in 3 closed-door meetings already today, she whispered. Who? Graham. And they're all with legal and finance. You think he suspects something? I offered her a small smile. If he doesn't yet, he will. She looked like she wanted to ask more. Instead, she just handed me a folder, lips pressed tight. Smart girl. Around noon, Miles Penner, from internal audit, stopped by with a file under his arm. He didn't sit, just rested one hand on the corner of my desk and said in his usual quiet tone, "Everything looks clean. The transfer is airtight. If anyone challenges it, they'll lose." I nodded. Thank you, Miles. He lingered a moment. Celeste, be careful. Graham doesn't lose well. I'm not trying to beat him, I said calmly. I'm trying to remind this place who really kept the lights on. By midweek, the whispers had turned into rumors. Someone in marketing said I was dating a board member. Someone in compliance suggested I'd threatened the legal team. Ridiculous theories. But they never once considered the truth, that I had simply earned what I held, piece by piece, year by year, in loyalty, in silence. That Thursday, I received a meeting invite I hadn't seen in years. Executive strategy session, full board review, and under attendees, in bold, Mrs. Celeste Morland, principal shareholder. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I had waited so long for this moment. I wasn't sure how to feel anymore. Vindication, satisfaction. No, what I felt was purpose. I accepted the invitation. Later that day, Graham caught me by the elevators. It was subtle, a smile too polished, a tone too smooth. Celeste, he said, you've been very involved lately, just doing my part. I replied, neutral. He chuckled. I've noticed a lot of files moving through your desk that normally wouldn't. Well, I said, pressing the elevator button. Some of us remember where the files actually are. He tilted his head. Let me be direct. Is something going on? I met his gaze for the first time since the boardroom. Mr. Vexley, I said evenly. If you're feeling uncertain, perhaps you should check the shareholder register. The elevator chimed open. I stepped inside, leaving him standing in silence. That night, Lydia brought me tea, real tea, in a ceramic mug with a napkin folded under it. I don't know what you're doing, she said, setting it down, but whatever it is, I think you're the only one who's earned the right to do it. I looked at her, young, sharp, aware. I'm not trying to burn anything down, I told her softly, just trying to remind them who laid the foundation. Outside, the Boston skyline gleamed, cold glass and steel against fading orange sky. I remembered nights I stayed past 9 p.m. drafting contracts, ordering dinner for executives who never said thank you, and retyping entire reports because someone didn't like the font. All of it, for this. And now, I would walk into that next board meeting not as an assistant, but as the woman who owned the room. The office had always ignored her presence. That week, they started to notice. They say power changes how people look at you, but in my case, I hadn't said a word. I hadn't changed my wardrobe, or taken a new office, or made a single public move. And yet, something about the air shifted. I could feel it in this way people paused when passing my desk, in the way conversations hushed the moment I entered the kitchen for coffee. I was still just Celeste Morland's secretary to the executive office. The title hadn't changed, but something in their eyes had. Monday morning came with a low buzz across the office. Something was brewing. Not from me, at least not yet, but from the tension I knew Graham must be feeling. The man thrived on control, and lately, he was losing the scent of it. Graham wasn't one to panic, not visibly, but subtle signs bled through. He started arriving earlier, barking shorter orders, hovering longer outside closed doors. His eyes flicked across people like searchlights, trying to spot a leak. Lydia Caro, ever watchful, stopped by my desk mid-morning. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway, then back to me. He's been in 3 closed-door meetings already today, she whispered. Who? Graham. And they're all with legal and finance. You think he suspects something? I offered her a small smile. If he doesn't yet, he will. She looked like she wanted to ask more. Instead, she just handed me a folder, lips pressed tight. Smart girl. Knows when to stay curious and when to stay quiet. Around noon, Miles Penner, from internal audit, stopped by with a file under his arm. He didn't sit, just rested one hand on the corner of my desk, and said in his usual quiet tone, everything looks clean. The transfer is airtight. If anyone challenges it, they'll lose. I nodded. Thank you, Miles. He lingered a moment. Celeste, be careful. Graham doesn't lose well. I'm not trying to beat him, I said calmly. I'm trying to remind this place who really kept the lights on. By midweek, The whispers had turned into rumors. Someone in marketing said I was dating a board member. Someone in compliance suggested I'd threaten the legal team. Another believed I had a sealed FBI file. Ridiculous theories, but they never once considered the truth that I had simply earned what I held, piece by piece, year by year, in loyalty, in silence. That Thursday, I received a meeting invite I hadn't seen in years. Executive strategy session, full board review, and under attendees, in bold, Meh. Celeste Morland, principal shareholder. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time, not because I was surprised, but because I had waited so long for this moment. I wasn't sure how to feel anymore. Vindication, satisfaction. No, what I felt was purpose. I accepted the invitation. Later that day, Graham caught me by the elevators. It was subtle, a smile too polished, a tone too smooth. Celeste, he said, you've been very involved lately. Just doing my part, I replied, neutral. He chuckled. I have noticed a lot of files moving through your desk that normally wouldn't. Well, I said, pressing the elevator button. Some of us remember where the files actually are. He tilted his head. Let me be direct. Is something going on? I met his gaze for the first time since the boardroom. Mr. Vexley, I said evenly, if you're feeling uncertain, perhaps you should check the shareholder register. The elevator chimed open. I stepped inside, leaving him standing in silence. That night, Lydia brought me tea, real tea, in a ceramic mug with a napkin folded under it. I don't know what you're doing, she said, setting it down, but whatever it is, I think you're the only one who's earned the right to do it. I looked at her, young, sharp, aware. I'm not trying to burn anything down, I told her softly, just trying to remind them who laid the foundation. Later that evening, I stayed in the office past 7. Sorrow. Not working, just walking. Quiet halls, quiet thoughts. I passed framed photographs. No one looked at anymore. Award banquets, ribbon cuttings, company retreats. I was in many of them, always standing slightly to the side, smiling, never centered, always adjacent. Funny how those who hold things together are rarely seen at the center. I returned to my desk and opened a drawer I hadn't touched in years. Inside were cards from past employees, notes scribbled in faded ink. Thank you for helping me get through the worst year of my life. You didn't have to stay that late, but you did. You made me feel like I belonged. I ran my fingers over the paper, and for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel the weight of those years. Not regret, not pain, just the quiet acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe there was power in the invisible. And now, I would walk into that next board meeting not as an assistant, but as the woman who owned the room. The silence after the meeting was louder than anything Graham had ever said. The boardroom emptied slowly. No one rushed out, but no one looked anyone in the eye either. It felt like watching the tide recede after an unexpected storm. No noise, no alarms, just the eerie calm of a space that knew something irreversible had happened. I remained seated, my documents neatly stacked, my pen still uncapped. Graham was gone. He had left without a word. No slamming doors, no protests, just a quiet exit that somehow felt louder than all his speeches combined. I stayed another 20 minutes after the last person left. I wasn't waiting for anyone. I just needed the silence. It was the first time in years that room had truly belonged to me. Not as a note-taker, not as a background fixture, but as the central presence. It felt strange, not triumphant, not bitter, just still. That night, I didn't sleep much, not from anxiety, but from momentum. My mind was awake, assembling new frameworks. I wasn't thinking about retaliation. I was thinking about preservation, repair, legacy. By the next morning, the energy in the office had changed. It wasn't tense. It was hesitant. People didn't avoid me anymore. They nodded. A few even smiled soft, uncertain things, like they were greeting someone they weren't sure they'd truly known. I wasn't just a secretary anymore. I wasn't even an executive. I was now the woman with the final word, the one with the deciding vote, the gravity. Everything else began to quietly orbit. Still, I came in at 7:45. I made my own coffee. I sat at my desk, because power doesn't have to announce itself. Sometimes, it just settles in. At 9:04, Lydia brought me a folder marked urgent. Her eyes flicked to the HR office down the hall. They're saying Graham requested emergency leave, she said, setting the folder down. Effective immediately. I nodded. And the board, waiting, she said, like everyone else. I sipped my tea, let them wait, let things breathe. A few minutes later, Miles Penner walked in with a thick folder under his arm. He closed my office door behind him for the first time in 18 years. It's official, he said. Your shareholder status is live with the SEC. Your name is everywhere it needs to be. And And Graham still holds some equity, but the board's already questioning his future role. Your move gave them cover. They won't defend him now. And the employees, still nervous. People are afraid of what change means, even good change. I nodded. Then we'll show them. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing every restructuring file Graham had pushed forward in the past 90 days. Dozens of jobs were on the chopping block. Entire departments scheduled for elimination in the name of agility. I'd written those memos. I'd formatted the footnotes. But now, I read them like an outsider, like someone seeing the house from the street instead of the inside hallway. At noon, I walked into the main break room, no announcement, no formal call, just me, holding a notepad. Department heads gathered quietly. Some shifted in their chairs. A few looked surprised. I didn't speak from behind a podium. I didn't wear a badge of authority. I stood near the window with the sunlight on my shoulder and said, I know things feel uncertain right now, but this company has never survived because of branding strategies or executive vision. It has survived because of the people who showed up before sunrise and stayed until the last file was locked away. That's you. I let the words settle. I'm not here to tear down what works, but we won't move forward by sacrificing the people who built the foundation. Someone from operations nodded. HR sat up straighter. I'm placing a hold on every downsizing decision and outsourcing contract. We're pausing all terminations pending human review name by name, not number by number. There was no applause, but there were breaths. Deep ones, shoulders that unclenched. That afternoon, I returned to my desk and found a single envelope waiting. Inside, a note from Howard. Some people build empires with noise, others preserve them in silence. You've done both. H. Tucked with it was a photo, black and white, a snapshot from 2 decades ago. Howard standing proudly in front of the company's headquarters on opening day. And there I was, off to the right, head bowed, clipboard in hand, invisible, yet present. I held that photo for a long time. Later that evening, as the last emails were sent and the hallway lights dimmed, a familiar figure appeared outside my glass door. Graham. His tie was loosened, his posture different. No swagger, just quiet. He opened the door without knocking. I'm not here to argue, he said. Good. He looked around the room like he'd never seen it before. His eyes landed on the small photograph framed behind me, my daughter, age 10, holding a lemonade stand sign I helped her paint the night before a big presentation. I never missed either. You planned this, he said finally. No, I replied. I prepared for it. Big difference. He nodded. The board's already pulling back support. They're doing what's right. He looked at me. No anger, just understanding tinged with defeat. I was wrong about you. I know. Graham stepped back, then paused. You're going to do well, Celeste. I looked him in the eye. I already have. He left quietly. This time, it felt final. And later that evening, HR confirmed it. Graham Vexley had officially cleared out his office. She never wanted his chair, just the one by the window. The one she'd always earned. The following Monday, Boston awoke under a soft grey sky. Autumn had settled in fully now, scattering orange and gold across every sidewalk. The air felt lighter, not because the temperature had dropped, but because something heavy had been lifted. I arrived at the office just before sunrise. As always, the lobby security guard greeted me with something new in his voice. Not obligation, but respect. Morning, Mrs. Morland, he said, not Celeste. Not ma'am, Mrs. Morland. Small things feel loud when you've spent years being invisible. I took the elevator up to the 12th floor. The office was still dark, just the hum of machines and the quiet click of my shoes. But the silence wasn't lonely. It was mine now. I passed Graham's old office. The blinds were drawn. No one had touched it since he left. A ghost office for a man who once believed no one could replace him. I didn't take that office. I never wanted it. Instead, I asked to move into the old meeting room on the east corner. It had wide windows that looked out toward the harbor, and a crooked radiator that clicked in the morning like it was remembering stories. It had no desk, no leather chair, just a long table, 2 armchairs, and space for light. Lydia helped me move my things. Not much my framed photo of my daughter, a half-used notebook from 2011, and a tiny bronze paperweight shaped like a fox, given to me by a former intern long ago. She set a small orchid on the window ledge. You don't want a nameplate? She asked. I shook my head. I've had enough labels for a lifetime. She smiled. This room suits you. Open, quiet, strong. I smiled back. Like you, she blushed and returned to her desk. That afternoon, I held my first official board strategy session as majority shareholder. I didn't take the head seat. I sat to the side, like I always had. Old habits linger, even after revolutions. But this time, When I spoke, no one cut me off. I introduced new guidelines. Executive bonuses would now be tied to employee satisfaction scores. No layoffs would be approved without departmental transparency. A new mentorship program would pair retiring employees with younger staff to pass down not just skills, but memory. When I mentioned the reinstatement of the family care stipend, one of the senior managers, hardened by years of bottom-line decisions, took off his glasses and rubbed his eyes. For a little too long. After the meeting, people lingered not out of obligation, but curiosity. Some thanked me, others just stayed close, as if proximity to something good might be enough for now. Later that week, I received a letter handwritten in faded blue ink. You've taken the company back to where it started. Not in size, not in dollars, but in soul. Thank you for protecting what I could no longer reach. H.D. Howard. He had always believed in dignity more than dominance. I finally understood what he meant. That Friday, I stopped by the 11th floor. The marketing team had redecorated their corner space. On the wall, framed in simple black glass, hung a quote, "Leadership is not a title. It's the quiet act of remembering who you're leading." Celeste Morland. I blinked, stunned. When did that go up? The director smiled. This morning, we took a vote. Unanimous. Back in my window room, Lydia entered with 2 cups of tea. "You're going to keep working here, aren't you?" she asked. "I already am. I mean, not just as the owner, as a mentor, a builder." I took a sip. "That's all I've ever been." She hesitated. "You know, when I joined, I was told to avoid becoming too much like you. Too quiet, too background. And now," she smiled, "now I hope I become half as steady." We sat by the window, watching the harbor lights flicker as dusk began to settle. I thought about every memo I wrote that someone else signed, every meeting I prepared and wasn't allowed to join, every lunch I skipped to reformat someone's spreadsheet, every time I was told, "You're just..." But here's the truth. I was never just anything. I was the one who stayed, the one who listened, the one who knew where the bones were buried, and where the gold still glowed beneath the dust. And now, finally, the light had found me, not in fanfare, not in headlines, but in the chair by the window, exactly where I belonged. Never underestimate quiet strength. Celeste Morland spent years being overlooked, dismissed as just a secretary, but through integrity, patience, and deep understanding of her company's soul, she rose not with noise, but with purpose. True leadership isn't about titles or loud ambition. It's about consistency, quiet wisdom, and the courage to act when the time is right. Sometimes, the people in the background are the very ones holding everything together. Respect isn't demanded, it's earned. And one day, when the moment arrives, those who were ignored may become the ones we all look to for direction.